My name is Kenneth Garcia. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. I've been into motorcycles since I was young, and I still enjoy going on a motorcycle tour by myself on weekends. When I was younger, I used to ride with friends, but some of them quit due to various reasons, and others became so busy that they hardly have time. But for me, who works as an office worker, this is precious time. One day, I took a long way around without using the highway and went to Itraman, which has good ratings. As I went into a road with a good view, I stopped to gaze at something that caught my eye. There was a man standing alone, with his motorcycle parked on the roadside. There's nothing around. Could his bike be broken? I parked my motorcycle behind his and spoke to him.
Is it broken?
The man seems to be in his late 50s, well-dressed and a grounded rider. He might be one of the so-called return riders, who loved motorcycles when they were young and have recently started riding again.
You didn't accidentally fill the wrong gasoline, right?
As I looked into the engine and asked the man, he said there was no problem with the gasoline. Are you familiar with motorcycles?
I'm actually a salesperson, so I'm not an expert in motorcycles. But I do know some.
These motorcycles and cars operate on the same principle: gasoline, electricity, and air. He says the gasoline is fine, so could it be the electrical system or the battery? While I was looking for the battery, a plug cord that was dangling loose caught my eye.
So can it be this? Maybe it got unplugged when you refueled?
I plugged the plug cord back in and started the engine, and a healthy engine sound echoed from the muffler. Thank you. You saved me. I thought I would have to call the road service, but I was actually reluctant to do it in the middle of nowhere. The man wanted to thank me by treating me to a drink, but there was not even a single vending machine nearby. I politely declined, saying I hadn't done anything big. But I can't just let you leave with your hands dirty.
If you ride a bike, this is normal. This isn't no big deal.
As I said that and wiped my hands with my pants, the man smiled pleasantly. Thanks to you, I'm saved. Thank you very much. Being praised face to face made me shy. We exchanged handshakes with a wish for safe driving. Being praised face to face made me shy. We exchanged handshakes with a wish for safe driving, and I parted from the man who seemed reluctant to say goodbye. But the more enjoyable the weekend is, the more gloomy Monday inevitably becomes. With a completely different atmosphere from yesterday, I headed to the office. Although my sales performance is not bad at all, my promotion is really slow. He is a rare example of an old-fashioned who runs things his way. Buttering up him is much better than bringing in contracts in order to promote. Actually, I don't think I should have to distort my way of life that much, but those below cannot choose those above. The salary of an office worker is something like a fee for patience, so it would be good if we could enrich our lives in our private time. I've completely given up on promotion and have been taking the approach of going with the flow. But just as I was settling into this mindset, the roar of Chief Davis, the problem, echoed throughout the office.
Hey, Miller. The date on this slip is wrong.
Anna Miller, who's in charge of accounting, stiffened and apologized in a small voice. Everyone, including me, was trying to avoid being involved and thinking, here we go again.
Didn't I tell you to check it properly? How many times do I have to say it?
Chief Davis stood up and walked to Diana's desk with the slip, nagging her the whole way. As he brushed off Diana's hair with the slip, the burn scar that she was hiding came into view. Diana has a large burn scar on one side of her face, which she usually hides by letting her hair down. I feel sorry for her because it must be hard for a woman, but Chief Davis knows that and harasses her anyway. Chief Davis is laughing at her, who is being extremely embarrassed, which is absolutely revolting to see. Seeing my boss making fun of her and her trying to get through it makes me feel so uncomfortable. I couldn't take it anymore, and I got up from my seat and headed to the kitchenette. It's really stupid and ridiculous. I was in the break room buying a coffee from the vending machine, trying to calm my emotions from the absurd incident that had just taken place when Diana walked in to wash some dishes. I figured she was probably stuck with the cleaning duties by Chief Davis. After some hesitation, I decided to buy another coffee and called out to her.
Are you alright? You shouldn't take it too seriously.
I'm fine. I've been made fun of since I was a child, so I'm used to it.
That's not alright at all. Although I thought so. I didn't say anything. Apparently, when Diana was a child, a fire from the neighbor's house spread to her home, and she lost both her house and her parents. She was then raised by her grandparents. The burn marks on her skin are from that incident, and she says she survived only because her mother shielded her. Seeing Diana smile, saying, "I'm content with just being alive," made my heart ache even more. Etchins the next day, when I returned from an outside job and had just placed my bag at my desk. I heard Chief Davis shouting, "Miller, didn't they tell you to finish yesterday's work?"
But I finished all the work orders you gave me yesterday.
When I turned around, Tatiana was being scolded again. It seemed like there was some misunderstanding, and Diana was unusually standing her ground. However, her attitude only stoked Chief Davis's anger more.
Are you talking back to me? If you finish everything, then there wouldn't be any left, right?
Realizing the situation, hung her head and stayed silent, but Chief Davis's anger didn't subside.
There's still some left, which means you haven't finished. Don't lie.
Chief Davis started harassing Diana, hitting her on the head with the slip while Diana quietly apologized.
By the way, you're a woman. You should at least wear makeup. Don't come to the office with a filthy face.
I was infuriated by Chief Davis's words. I couldn't stand it anymore, but Chief Davis continued to berate Diana.
What's with those burn scars? Aren't you embarrassed? If you can't work properly, at least try to look more feminine.
I recalled the story I heard from Diana yesterday. She lost her parents because of that burn. It's not a matter to be overlooked due to ignorance, and it's too insensitive. Chief Davis, that's going too far. When I intervened, the onlookers around us were surprised.
This is none of your business, is it? Just do your job.
Chief Davis, I think there's no relation between one's appearance and their work. When I retorted, Chief Davis's face turned beet red.
You've got guts. Gotcha. If you have a problem with me or boss, you don't have to stay in this department. I can transfer you. Go work in another department. You've got guts. Gersha, if you have a problem with me, your boss, you don't have to stay in this department.
Been transferred. And that's how I was kicked out of the department I had been until now. The department I was reassigned to was a small section that handled the management of materials and supplies used in each department. It was a small space with a few older ladies where I would compile the inventory of the warehouse and the work orders for manufacturers. Anyone could see at a glance that I was treated as a troublemaker and was here. But there wasn't even a window in this room. Chief Davis had really done it. While I wanted to express my resentment, a part of me felt relieved. Even if I had stayed there was no chance of getting promoted. Even if I did get promoted, I would have to keep reading Chief Davis's face even more. I don't think I could stand it. Sooner or later, this would have happened. Maybe I should seriously consider changing jobs. Since coming here, I've been thinking about my future, and one thing has been bothering me. Is Diana going to be all right from now on? With me standing up to Chief Davis, the others will likely turn a blind eye even more. I had meant to defend Diana because I couldn't bear it, but if I end up getting ostracized as a result, I won't be able to protect Diana anymore. I didn't mean to regret my actions, but when I think about it, my actions seem rash and naive. What should I have done? I tried to answer my own questions, but couldn't find a satisfactory answer. A few days later, as I was checking the warehouse inventory and returning to my desk, an old woman who was summarizing order forms talked to me. Apparently, there was an inspection from the head office today, and important people were going around each department. An old woman told me that I might get pointed out if I took a break. I almost put into words that it would be useless to visit such a place, but agreed with her by nodding. However, contrary to my expectations, just as the outside became noisy, a higher-up, accompanied by about 10 subordinates, came in. The old women who always have a lively conversation are also doing their work in silence. I was also concentrating on my own work, summarizing the slips without making eye contact.
Ifem, you on Bjarm.
Suddenly, I was approached by them, and I stopped what I was doing and looked up. Next to me, an important person was standing, smartly dressed. Between the personals, beside them a male subordinate seemed to be comparing me and the important male person with a dubious look.
Hans Executive Jones, Genome.
As I heard the voice of the man who called out, I looked at the face of the man named Executive Jones, and I realized Executive Jones was the man I had helped fix the motorcycle before.
Yeah, it's you. I thought I'd seen you somewhere.
Executive Jones talked to me happily as if his subordinate's question didn't matter. That despite being a higher-up, He gave off a friendly and approachable impression and tried to shake hands with me, just like when we first met. When I stood up and responded to the handshake, the people around me were surprised.
Parking in our company. Pulled us small. Thank you very much at that time, so
Though not at all. Oh, I'm sorry to be late, but my name's Kenneth Garcia. By the way, has your motorcycle been okay since then?
Portia, thanks to you, it's in great shape. If we're in the same company, want me over touring somewhere next time?
As Executive Jones patted my shoulder and laughed happily, he suddenly stopped, as if he had realized something.
You said you were in sales, didn't you?
No, well, I tried to laugh it off, but being with the older women, my presence stands out and it obviously looks unnatural to whoever sees it. There is a little guilt in telling on Chief Davis, but it might be an opportunity to protect Diana. Perhaps sensing my difficulty, Executive Jones looked back at the other important people who had accompanied him.
Oh, we know each other. Keel first?
When I asked, how about a coffee with Joy? Executive Jones smiled.
Hey, can someone lend me some money? I forgot my wallet.
Terrence, a subordinate who was about to leave the room, came back in a great hurry and handed money to the executive. The executive said, "Sorry." "Thank you." I had a coffee and talked with Executive Jones, who is in a considerably higher position in the company. It was an unbelievably inappropriate scene, but Executive Jones seemed not to care and listen to my story seriously. I told the truth about my feelings, about the environment and the emotional distress that a woman named Diana has experienced. Tips about the environment and heart injuries that a woman named Diana has brought. About the daily life of acting bravely to overcome it. I have a feeling that I want to support her as a man, as a human being. Executive Jones listened to the story silently until the end and only answered, "I understand," and returned to the room where the old ladies were. Hoping only the subordinate who handed the money was waiting, but Executive Jones didn't look at him and said, "I'll borrow the phone," and started making an extension somewhere.
You may come right now.
At that word of Executive Jones, Chief Davis flew in out of breath. Chief Davis, who's repeating greetings desperately, seems to be making some excuses, and Executive Jones raises his hand annoyingly to control such Chief Davis.
And Kenneth was in sales when I met him before. Can you explain why he was signed here?
Chief Davis was visibly sweating and stuttering in response. Seeing him fumble, Executive Jones sighed deeply and faced Chief Davis squarely.
Chief Davis, if you're gonna lead the young talents who'll shape the future of the company, there must be some reasons behind your action, right? What does it mean that you can't provide an answer? And we trust leaving the management of subordinates in your hands.
Executive Jones said this and turned around, calling out to the subordinate who had been waiting alone.
Chief Davis and investigate thoroughly. Look into all of the finances up to now, the staff sales and all contract acquisitions.
But the subordinate who responded affirmatively went to Chief Davis's side. At the sight of Chief Davis, with a color on his face that one has never seen before, shaking in fear, was something to behold. For a week later, so I was formally reassigned to my old department. Chief Davis, whose issues were exposed one after another, was demoted and sent to a remote subsidiary company. When I returned, Chief Davis had already transferred, and my colleagues welcomed my return. As I looked at everyone's delighted faces, I once again felt that each of them had been carrying various stresses. And just like everyone else, my heart was filled with the joy of liberation. On the day of my return, as I was about to leave the company, I was stopped by Diana and thanked once again. Apparently, Executive Jones had directly visited Diana and heard about the consultation with me. Diana, who had apologized for the trouble caused by Chief Davis's lax management, was as surprised by Executive Jones's character as I was. I was glad to see that Diana was at ease, and it seemed that the scars from her burns were becoming a little less noticeable. Diana has been continuing treatment by regularly visiting the hospital, and it seems that with the progress of medical treatment, it will be considerably less noticeable in the future. I was happy with the continuation of good news, but more than that, I was happy that Diana had started smiling a lot. Apparently, when Diana talked with Executive Jones, she also heard the story of how I had helped fix Executive Jones's bite. Amazingly, Diana also loves motorcycles and has been riding them for a long time.
That's with a helmet on, I can hide burn scars, and you can go far without having to talk to anyone.
As I was listening to her, I still felt sorry for her. But without concerning herself with my state, Diana looked into my face.
When I told Executive Jones that I also ride a motorcycle, he invited me to go for touring with you and him. He said there's a noodle restaurant he recommends. Kenneth, do you like noodles?
When I answered, of course, Diana said God and giggled. Seeing Diana smile, I was genuinely happy. I'm a regular 33-year-old office worker. After graduating from Yale University, I landed a job at a major corporation headquartered in downtown New York. I've always been a bit timid, prone to getting easily upset over minor troubles, so my initial 3 years at the company were extremely difficult. I believe the reason I've managed to become a competent businessman is all thanks to the great bosses I've encountered so far. Especially after being assigned to the New York sales department at the age of 30, my boss, Thompson, seemed to take a special liking to me. Indeed, it was in this New York sales department that I met Mary Ann. Mary Ann, who worked in sales administration, and I got along well as we handled the same clients, and we got married when I was 30 and she was 32. Our marriage was smooth and we were a happy couple. If anything, I was somewhat under her thumb, but I didn't mind and enjoyed everyday life. The only problem was that we were unable to have children. Having children was a dream of mine, and I'd always expressed this to Mary Ann. Mary Ann, who loves children, agreed, and we tried many times as a couple, but we were never blessed with a child. Despite this, I believed I had been leading a relatively smooth and prosperous life. That is, until the end of last year. From around December of last year, my circumstances changed dramatically. I began having fights with Mary Ann, who I rarely argued with since we got married almost every day. For some reason, Mary Ann started to be on the warpath with me. While Mary Ann is quite blunt, unlike me, she hates illogical or unfair situations. In other words, she's not the type to lose her temper unreasonably or treat people differently based on her mood. However, Mary Ann had become a different person. She no longer smiled at all, and if I came home a little late, she would say, "Why are you coming home so late? You're having an affair, aren't you?" I'm going back to my parents' house, and she actually did. And if I sought intimacy at night, she would reject me, saying, "No way, don't touch me." It's disgusting. At first, I thought, well, people go through phases like this. Mary Ann had quit her job when we got married and was working part-time at a local supermarket during the day, so I figured that was probably a stressful work environment. Or maybe she was frustrated with herself for not getting pregnant despite my constant desire for a child. So, I decided to let her do as she pleased for a while. However, instead of improving, the situation only got worse. Because Mary Ann's attitude became increasingly worse, and she often went back to her parents' house in New York. Even when I went to pick her up, I was turned away. I found myself raising my voice more and more, and our marital relationship had completely chilled. Then, in February of this year, Mary Ann presented me with divorce papers. When she coldly said, "It's a good thing we don't have children." I was furious for the first time in my life. I had reached the end of my patience with Mary Ann, who had not explained her disagreeable attitude no matter how much I asked, and I stamped the papers in a fit of anger. Thus, our marriage ended after 3 years. But the troubles that had befallen me were not over. A Thompson, who had always been attentive to me and often invited me to drinks or golf, suddenly became distant. I was having an experience I'd never wanted to have. This where the attitude of someone I had been on good terms with changed dramatically for no apparent reason. And I was experiencing 2 of them at the same time. I was disliked by Thompson for some reason, who had the authority to make personnel decisions, and it led to my demotion. I was transferred to a sales office in rural Nebraska, which was referred to in the company as a retirement home or a place of exile. The transfer order came 2 days after my divorce from Mary Ann was finalized. Thus, my life in the country, plagued by anger and despair, began. One chilly day in April, I left the office at the end of the day and trudged toward my rented single-person apartment. A cold rain was falling outside, which further dampened my spirits. As I was walking down the road, I noticed a young woman sitting against a utility pole. I thought she might be drunk from a party or something, but as I got closer, I realized something was wrong. A smashed smartphone was lying next to her, and with a bad feeling, I immediately looked at her face and found that she was unconscious with her eyes rolled back. I called out to her, "Are you okay?" But there was no response. Her smartphone was broken, and there was a high chance she couldn't call anyone for help. Judging the situation, I quickly called an ambulance. I held an umbrella over her head to keep it from getting wet while waiting for the ambulance to arrive, and I put my coat on her. The paramedics arrived, but there seemed to be no family or friends around, so we accompanied her. Once we arrived at the hospital and I was waiting in the waiting room, her doctor spotted me and informed me her condition has improved. She seemed to have passed out due to low blood pressure amid her unstable condition during her pregnancy. The baby is safe too. He must have mistaken me for her spouse. And there, I was relieved to find out she was pregnant and that I could respond early. Just as I was about to explain, no, actually, I'm not her family, just a passerby. A couple in their 60s ran up shouting, "Doctor, is the baby okay?" They were probably her parents. "Yes, both of them are safe." "You must be relieved," the doctor replied, and the couple showed their relief and joy with their whole bodies. It seemed as if the thread of tension had been instantly released. She would have been in danger if she had been left out in the rain unconscious. She would have been in danger if she had been left out in the rain unconscious, but thanks to this man here who reported it quickly, the doctor said, and the couple came over to me crying and thanking me.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're a lifesaver.
And that's how I ended up being invited to the Reynolds family house over the weekend. Sophie made a full recovery and had been discharged from the hospital, and they wanted to thank me as a family. Since I had no plans for the weekend, I decided to accept their invitation. I was astonished when I arrived at the address they gave me. Epsing mansion that towered on a cliff, which I could barely see from my rundown apartment, was the Reynolds house. Nervously, I rang the intercom, and all 3 members of the Reynolds family came out to greet me. The second thing that blew me away that day was the lavish meal. Lobster abalone, domestically produced branded beef. Any high-quality ingredient you could name was laid out on the table.
Are you sure about all this? I think it's more than my monthly salary.
I asked, secretly wishing I had skipped meals for the past 3 days, to which the father replied, "You saved the life of our Sophie and her baby." It's only natural. We even thought about going out to buy a whole bluefin tuna. After that, a friendly conversation started, but I was about to be blown away for the 3rd time that day. Sophie's father was a renowned surgeon in America, and his name was known to everyone in the field of surgery. Like many talented and wealthy people, Sophie's father had a relaxed attitude toward life and was fundamentally warm to people. His wife and Sophie also touched my heart with the same warmth, and before I knew it, I was talking about Marianne. The fact that her attitude had suddenly changed even though we had been getting along, the fact that I still didn't know why, and the fact that I couldn't completely hate Marianne. The father seemed truly sorry for me. First, with his large hands, he patted my shoulder and said, "There must be some reason, but it's a shame to choose to divorce a kind young man like you. But cheer up. This is a rural area, but the air and food are delicious, and it's a perfect place to heal your heart." I felt a little better. After enjoying the melt-in-your-mouth delicious food, I decided to leave the mansion. We still haven't thanked you enough, so if you ever need anything, feel free to come and see us. The couple, who were in high spirits from the wine, saw me off. Sophie said she would walk part of the way home with me, so we walked together for a while.
I don't know if it's my place to ask, but I'm really curious about what happened to Mary Ann.
I know, right? I can't think of anything. I wish there was a way to peek into Mary Ann's head. I've thought about that many times. Sophie added, we can't see inside her head, but couldn't we find out what she was interested in at that time? I was taken aback. That's right. Mary Ann always used my account to search because she thought logging out was a hassle. It's not cool to check my ex-wife's search history, but I'll look into it.
That's not uncool. Oh, you're a hero. Do you see?
Please let me thank you again. I ran back to my apartment at full speed. Why hadn't I thought of it sooner? As soon as I got into the room, I checked the internet search history. It started around the end of last year, when Mary Ann started acting strange. Checking my past records, I was struck dumb. It was as if time had frozen in place. And then, without thinking, I bolted out. By the time I reached Mary Ann's childhood home in New York, it was late into the night. After a bit of hesitation, I pressed the intercom. The air was clear and the stars were clearly visible, but my heart was filled with an even darker cloud than this morning. After a while, Mary Ann came out of the house. She was trying to look displeased, but I could tell she was bittersweet, maybe even happy. Why didn't I notice? In hindsight, Mary Ann's unhappy face was somewhat unnatural, and seeing Mary Ann's thin figure confirmed that my assumptions were correct. Mary Ann, do you have cancer? Mary Ann couldn't hold back her tears and broke down on the spot. She found out she had cancer during a checkup at the end of last year. The type of cancer that is difficult to remove with surgery. Her chances of conceiving were significantly reduced, and that she couldn't bring herself to tell me, who had been longing for a child. Even so, I wanted you to tell me the truth. Not choosing to break up, but to want to fight this together. I said,
But I wanted you to be happy. You're so kind and love children, the type who should become a father. I thought you should have children with someone else, not with me who can't give birth.
She replied. I hugged Mary Ann. It felt like it had been a long time. Mary Ann didn't resist and sobbed in my chest. Then I left New York on the first flight the next morning and returned to my transfer location. Instead of going back to my house, I went straight to the mansion on the cliff. When I rang the doorbell, Sophie and her father welcomed me again with a smile. What's up? Did you forget something? I deeply bowed my head to Sophie's father on the spot. Sir, I beg you, please introduce me to the best doctor you know. I woke up in the gentle early summer sunlight. Today was Monday, a day I had to go to work. I quietly got out of bed, went out on the balcony, and bathed in the morning sun of the city. 5 years had passed since the divorce fiasco with Mary Ann. Sophie's father accepted my desperate plea and introduced me to a doctor who he said was the only one who could match him. It was a difficult operation, but all the cancer that had been eating away at Marianne's body was gone. After the surgery, we immediately remarried. During our separation, we had both realized, more than we could stand, that we were irreplaceable parts of each other's lives. That's a great even after that. Sophie's father helped me for a year. He introduced me to several CEOs he knew, presenting them as new business prospects for me. Thanks to Sophie's father's connections, I was able to achieve some of the top sales figures nationwide. As a result, I was able to return to New York in a year. As I expected, Marianne was the one who requested my demotion to Thompson. Since we had many common acquaintances in New York, she feared that news of her having cancer would leak from somewhere. Unable to turn down Marianne's desperate plea, and yet feeling guilty towards me, she seemed to have acted awkwardly. Thompson kept apologizing to me, but now that I think about it, my life drastically changed because of that transfer, and it wasn't a bad experience after all. As I was thinking about that, Marianne woke up with a bedhead, but she smiled brightly. "Good morning. Want me to make coffee?"
Yes, please. Oh, make it decaf.
Sure. I'm truly glad to be able to have such casual exchanges. Besides glancing at the clock, I realized that more time had passed than I thought. I need to start preparing. Oh, time to dawdle. I began getting ready in a hurry yet quietly, so as not to wake our sweet child sleeping peacefully in the bedroom. At the trading company where I work, there was a rather unusual receptionist. Normally, you'd expect receptionists to look like models, but she had a round face, was a bit chubby, and on the shorter side. She had a charming, cute face, but her vibe was definitely different from other receptionists. I visit that company once a week, and one day, I noticed her cheeks puffed out like a squirrel's. Wondering what was up, I realized she was sucking on candy. Having her speak to me with something in her mouth caught me off guard, and I burst into laughter. She laughed too, looking a bit embarrassed. That was how I started dating Lillian. Lillian was the epitome of the phrase free spirits. Being with her often caught me off guard because of her unpredictable antics, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. 3 years into our relationship, when I proposed, she dropped a bombshell on me.
"I didn't mention it before, but my dad is the CEO of our company."
As Lillian happily slid the ring I gave her onto her finger, she said, "Wait, CEO?"
"Yeah, the CEO. I was working as a receptionist because my dad asked me to. I was the only not-so-pretty one, right?"
"No, I never thought of you as ugly." Wait. My mind went blank. Hold on, does that mean Lillian is the heiress? Why didn't you tell me sooner?
"Well, it doesn't really matter, right? Or would you not have liked me if you knew I was the CEO's daughter?"
Her innocent smile left me speechless again. Lillian lived alone in a small studio apartment. I'd been to her place a few times, and it wasn't extravagant, but she had some expensive things and more pricey items. I just thought her family might be well off. I never imagined she was the heiress to our client's company.
I accept your proposal. Looking forward to our future together. My dad knows about us. Like, ang shiksin input. He said he's more than happy to welcome the man I chose. Don't worry, my dad's a bit eccentric.
Just remembering the CEO, whom I'd met a few times. I nodded. I'd heard Lillian's dad, the CEO, was the third generation running the company. Rumor had it he was a rich kid who just continued running the company the same way his parents did. But I didn't dislike him.
And he was very much like Lillian, and when I went to ask for Lillian's hand in marriage, he welcomed me with a big smile.
Lisa's married life was smooth until our daughter, Rose, was born. Psychosocial issues began cropping up when Rose turned 3.
I want to get Rose into Spanish classes.
Spanish. Rose is only 3.
I started learning Spanish, Chinese, and French when I was 3 too.
Of course, she'd say that she's a CEO's daughter. I thought to myself,
the tuition is about $2,000, but my dad said he'd cover it, so don't worry, okay, Bob?
We can't let your dad pay that.
But we can't afford it with your salary, right? And my dad also said he wants her to learn ballet. It's for his precious granddaughter, so why not?
It's with a big smile. I'm easily persuaded, but securing overwhelmed by the thought of spending $3,500 a month on English and ballet classes. I tried to object, but it didn't end there. She wanted to enroll Rose in a prestigious private school with an integrated curriculum from elementary to college. I firmly opposed that and had Rose attend a local public school instead. But Lillian started showering Rose with expensive clothes, shoes, and bags. She'd buy new items even if the old ones were barely used, discarding them like they were nothing.
Those enough's enough. How much are you spending on Rose?
Oh, just about $10,000 a month. And it's all covered by my dad, so it's not a burden on you, right? So you want to dress Rose in raggedy clothes.
I'm saying don't dress a 6-year-old in a sweater that costs, hundreds of dollars.
Arguments like this became frequent and often. Lillian would take Rose and head to her parents' home. Lillian's father, the CEO, always scolded me, saying, "Don't make my daughter and granddaughter live a poor life." This became a recurring pattern in our lives. This went on, and eventually, I was completely drained. I realized for the first time how nerve-wracking it is to live with someone whose values are so different from mine. After 13 years of marriage, when Rose started middle school, we finally got divorced. I took custody of Rose. Of course, Lillian and my mother-in-law insisted on taking her, but Rose herself chose to live with me. Now at 12, Rose said, "I don't hate Mom, you know. I wish you guys didn't have to get divorced. But I've been struggling too." But Rose exclaimed softly, "That's what I hated."
I never had friends. I always looked different, and because of English lessons and ballet, I never had time to play with anyone. I just want to be normal.
hearing that even Lillian couldn't say anything further. Rose mentioned that she would visit occasionally, and with a nod, Lillian returned to her family's mansion. As years went by, I never met Lillian again, but it seemed Rose met her frequently. I was fine with that. It's not like I grew to hate her and broke things off. I was just exhausted by our extremely different values and chose to separate. I knew this from the start. Sometimes, I even felt sorry for Lillian. Then one day at work, a colleague, David, told me something shocking.
You hear about Mr. Parker's place? Sounds rough.
Mr. Parker is Lillian's father. Ralph.
Oh, there's serious talk of a takeover. Apparently, the employees want her since they don't trust Mr. Parker as a CEO. But they know it's a do and I buy.
I see. Well, it's none of your business now. David patted my shoulder and walked away. I sighed secretly. I'd heard rumors for some time about Mr. Parker's company being taken over by a foreign corporation. Indeed, the old man, being a third-generation owner, had a bit of a laid-back attitude and some strange ideas about money. Just like his daughter, I thought. However, unlike Lillian, Mr. Parker was the CEO. It was more than just his sense of money being off. A few months later, I learned that Mr. Parker's company was taken over and he was removed as CEO. I didn't hear a thing from Lillian, which was expected. Rose and I were in our 6th year living together. Right now, 18. Rose was studying hard for her college entrance exams. Your birthday's this month, right? Anything you want. I asked during breakfast, and after thinking for a bit, Rose said something I wasn't expecting. I don't need anything. I just want you to visit Mom. I take 8? Visit Mom? Why? She didn't answer. She seemed on the verge of saying something, but stood up without a word.
Never mind. It's nothing.
It's clearly something. What's on your mind?
It's really fine. I'll leave the gift up to you. I'm looking forward to it, okay?
She then headed out saying she was leaving. What was that about? I wondered, feeling uneasy. I had to get ready for work, so I got up and left. The following Sunday, I drove to a large shopping mall about an hour from home. Actually, to buy Rose's birthday gift. The mall was bustling with families on their day off, making it hard to browse leisurely. Well, what to get her? I wondered. I can't really gift my 18-year-old daughter a stuffed animal anymore. But then again, things like clothes or shoes might not match her taste, making them hard to pick. Maybe jewelry would be safe. There was a store that sold gemstones, so I decided to check it out. Before Rose, born in September, sapphire is her birthstone. A young woman in her early 20s approached. I'm looking for a birthday gift for my daughter, but I'm not sure what to get. She'll be turning 18. Well, these designs over here are quite popular. I looked at a few options, but none seemed to fit Rose's image. Seeing my indecision, the store associate offered, "We can custom make something for you." However, we can't do it at this location. We have our main store down on Main Street. If you purchase a gemstone, the crafting is free. How does that sound? Hearing this, it reminded me of something from the past. I think it was Rose's 7th or 8th birthday. Lillian had bought some glass beads and made a handmade bracelet for her. Rose cherished it more than any branded item and still keeps it. I picked out some stones. Following the woman's advice, I bought a silver chain. I planned to head straight to the main store, but I got hungry and stopped at a diner. As I was looking at the menu, a loud argument from a table behind me caught my attention. Why do I have to repeat myself so many times? There's an order to doing things. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear sorry. How old are you? Even a high schooler in their first job would be more useful than you. Upon hearing Rose's question, Lillian glanced at me briefly. It seemed a seasoned part-timer was teaching a newbie, but the shouting was unbearable. That's though I thought it might be none of my business. I didn't want to dine listening to that, so I got up. Maybe you should calm down and instruct her somewhere private. This is honestly annoying for the customers. Both women looked at me. For a moment, I was stunned. Lillian? Bonad. To my astonishment, the woman being scolded was Lillian. She looked nothing like her former self. With disheveled hair and skin resembling that of an elderly woman. I apologize for the inconvenience. I'll handle this immediately. A man, presumably the manager, intervened and took the other woman to the back. Lillian and I were left staring at each other.
Did Rose tell you?
She asked, barely audible. I shook my head. No, it's a coincidence. I was at the nearby mall and...
At the mall?
Yes. I was buying a gift for Rose. Hearing this...
Right, it's her birthday.
Tears welled up in her eyes. Bravely wiping them away, Lillian mumbled, I have to get back to work, and tried to leave. I quickly asked, when do you finish? I want to talk. I'll pick you up when you're done. Antically speaking. Lillian seemed unsure but nodded. However, she eventually said, I'll be off by 5 p.m. and then vanished into the kitchen. Lillian came out from the back door, and we talked in the car. I knew her father had been fired as CEO, but I never imagined he had passed away.
He's conceived. He never drank before, but he started drinking heavily every day and unexpectedly passed away from acute liver cirrhosis. Not a cent was left in inheritance, just a pile of debts. That was a result. The house was put up for sale, and everything from cars to boats was let go. I'm living alone now.
Her forced smile was just heart-wrenching, and I couldn't help but look away.
You probably think I got what I deserved, huh? Just like the grasshopper in the story of the ant and the grasshopper. Looking carelessly, buying whatever I wanted, throwing things away when I was done, and before I knew it, nothing was left.
She tightly gripped her knees. Her hands were chapped and worn out.
I can't even buy a gift for Rose's birthday. I constantly ignored what Bob had to say. I was such a foolish wife.
She looked deeply sorry, and I was speechless. I don't think she got what she deserved, but it did seem like a series of inevitable consequences. However, I also felt maybe she finally realized it. Wrapped it completely, I pulled out a bag from my pocket that contained the stone I bought earlier and handed it to Lillian.
What is it?
It's Rose's birthstone. That weren't you always good with your hands? Just make something for Rose with it.
Mel?
Remember when you made that bracelet for Rose? She still treasures it. She values it more than any brand name item. Hearing this, Lily hesitantly took the bag. I'll be back next week to pick it up. Can you do it? I silently waited until she stopped crying. The apartment I dropped her off at was much more run down than I had imagined. When I got home, I asked Rose, "Did you know about your mom's situation?" Rose nodded, and I told her about our unexpected meeting earlier in the day. By the end, Rose was crying, pleading, "Please. Ice is complete easier to get there. Help Mom out." To which I replied, "I'll do what I can." Even though he said that, I wasn't sure about what to do. As harsh as it sounds, I didn't think it was right for us to get back together at this point. Instead, I wanted to help Lillian stand on her own 2 feet. Then what seemed like a godsend, an opportunity came knocking. During lunch break, the HR manager, whom I happened to be dining with, mentioned we're looking for someone fluent in Chinese. I remember Lillian was good at Spanish and Chinese.
Here, I know the perfect one for the job. Not only is she fluent in Chinese, but also in Spanish and French. Could we possibly, set up an interview?
I nodded with excitement. That night, I asked Rose to get in touch with her mom. Her upbringing as a privileged young lady was finally going to pay off. Half a year passed. Lillian seemed to be working enthusiastically at our company every day. Though we work in different departments, I've heard from various colleagues about how outstanding Lillian is. Sometimes, Rose would bring Lillian home. She'd cook dinner for us, dishes like meat and potatoes or a simple vegetable stir-fry, and I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly. It was hard to believe this was the same woman who used to serve caviar and high-end steaks daily. Upon hearing Rose's question, Lillian glanced at me briefly.
Well, she trailed off, looking down.
Her once gaunt face had now filled out a bit, resembling the Lillian I once knew. Will there ever be a time when we reconcile? But I don't think that time is right now. At the very least, I want to watch over Lillian as she's finally started to navigate her life as an adult.
When Mom saves up $10,000, maybe.
I joked. Lillian responded, "That's a piece of cake for me."
You're one to talk. Mom, if I hadn't stopped you the other day, you would have bought that Gucci wallet, right?
Oh well, I just thought it looked nice.
As on Rose's chest, sweetest sapphire necklace she had made. Today is the wedding day of my precious daughter. My daughter Grace was always bright and dedicated in everything she did. Since graduating from high school, she must have had her share of fun times, but she also faced an equal amount of challenges and struggles. Having overcome those experiences, I'm genuinely happy to see her smiling next to her groom. Chris Miller accepted upright Kims before the ceremony began. I was reminiscing over old memories while sipping coffee at the venue's cafe. Inspired by my beloved high school teacher after graduating from a renowned university. I declined a job offer from a top-tier company to become a high school teacher. And to this day, I still remember how thrilled I was to receive an offer from such a prestigious company. But just like my mentor, I was determined to teach the younger generation about the joy of learning and wanted to inspire them for the future, so I chose to be a teacher. Initially, there were many challenges as everything was new, but I threw myself into the job with all I had. Perhaps my dedication paid off, as gradually students began to say things like, "I'm glad Mr. Brown taught me," words that are the ultimate compliment for any teacher. I was blessed with wonderful students and colleagues and thought I'd serve till retirement. However, an unfortunate incident forced me to resign. While I was fortunate to have many supportive colleagues, there was one, particularly Mr. William, who always seemed to have a snide remark ready for me. You see, I respected Mr. William, who had achieved notable success as a track and field coach, but it seemed he didn't feel the same about me. According to what I heard from my colleague, he was jealous seeing the admiration I received from other teachers and students and saw me as a rival. Being unaware of Mr. Williams' feelings, I deeply regret causing a commotion that involved not only colleagues, but indirectly some precious students. The school I worked at had a long history of producing top-tier athletes across various sports. Plus, the track and field team that Mr. William coached was among them, guiding numerous promising athletes every day. While Mr. William was passionate, he had the athletes undergo rigorous training to perform in competitions. While many could keep up, at one point, one of the athletes suffered a severe injury due to the excessive training, essentially ending his sports career. Eventually, the student had to quit the team. Having counseled that student occasionally, I deeply regretted not having understood the situation better, which might have prevented this outcome. Keep feeling responsible. I decided to resign a few years after the batch I was mentoring graduated. Yet to next, despite the challenges, a few years after my resignation, I received delightful news from Grace that she met someone she wanted to marry. She'd met him by coincidence at a hospital, and they got attracted to each other's personalities and decided to get married. And they plan to visit their parents' home soon to formally introduce him. Dad, it's been a while. I'm sorry for all the trouble over the years. Don't say that. Just seeing you happy and healthy is enough for me.
Nice to meet you, sir. I'm Chris Miller, and I've been seeing Grace.
Nice to meet you. Chris, I've been looking forward to seeing you. Grace's fiancé. Chris was a friendly and genuine young man. It's like seeing him earnestly expressing his intentions to marry Grace made me feel that he's the right one for her. Thanks to you, Chris, I get to see such a happy face on Grace. I truly appreciate it. Please take care of my daughter.
Yes, sir. Say, I promise you to make Grace happy.
Let's get happy together. Grace and Chris laughing wholeheartedly, both my wife and I couldn't help but smile. Finishing my coffee and reminiscing about the past, I went to pay the bill and headed to the wedding venue. While I was feeling a mix of sadness and joy about my lovely daughter's new chapter, I was suddenly stopped by a familiar voice.
Oh, well, wasn't that Mr. Brown?
Turning around, I saw my former colleague, Butch and Pally MC. I was momentarily speechless, seeing his face for the first time since my resignation. What a coincidence. It's good to see you're well.
So what have you been up to since leaving? As I assume finding a job in the private sector after being a public servant wasn't easy.
It was a challenge, but now I'm teaching at a tutoring school near my home.
Oh, was that so? That sounds tough. Did your salary increase? Are you struggling?
Yes, my pay did decrease, but I'm happy to be in a job where I can interact with students now. Looking at my reaction, Mr. William seemed displeased, his words tinged with a hint of sarcasm. He's always been a bit condescending, and I felt downhearted to be treated this way even on my daughter's special day.
Oh, by the way, are you here for a wedding today?
Yes, it's actually my daughter's wedding.
How kidding! What a coincidence. I'm in Chinese Marlin daughter's getting married this afternoon.
Congratulations. What a remarkable coincidence.
Oh, by the way, my daughter's marrying a very talented man who works for a major corporation. I guess it's all thanks to her being so outstanding. Did your daughter, find a decent partner? Mr. Brown?
Yes, of course. My daughter is very responsible, so I've left such matters to her.
I see. Oh, yeah. I can probably guess, but anyway, congratulations on her wedding.
Thank you very much.
I could tolerate him making fun of me, but not my daughter. Trying to keep my composure on this joyous occasion for my daughter, I bid Mr. William a quick farewell, intending to head to the waiting room. Just then, there was a commotion outside the venue. Luxury cars began to pull up, one after another. Celebrities and socialites in dazzling outfits started walking into my daughter's wedding venue.
What on earth is going on? Why are they heading to your daughter's wedding?
It turns out they're acquaintances of Grace's fiancé, Chris. I was surprised when I first heard too.
What do you mean? I thought your daughter was marrying, just an average office worker.
Please calm down. X makes Mr. William.
Mr. William, increasingly flustered, approached me closely. Just then, Grace stepped in between us and called out to us. Grace, with a worried look on her face, and Chris are coming our way.
Hi, Chris Miller.
Chris Miller. To our delight, he's marrying our daughter.
Why did you tell me? Could you deliberately, keep silent about your daughter's fiancé to humiliate me?
I truly apologize for not mentioning it. But Chris, being an internationally renowned athlete, has unique circumstances. Grace and Chris decided it would be best not to publicize it too much. I'm sorry for not telling you the truth.
Mr. William looked down, speaking in a choked voice. His clenched fist was white-knuckled. It reminded me of the day I retired and when a student athlete quit the track team.
You still hate me, don't you?
Oh, Mr. William, why such sudden question? Besides that, there's no such feeling.
Just as I was at a loss for words, Grace stepped forward.
Grace, did you want to avoid seeing me, especially on your wedding day? After all, I'm the coach you despise, the one who ruined your athletic future.
I clenched my fist. But the student at the heart of the incident leading to my resignation was none other than my daughter. Grace. She had been a promising track athlete, even competing at national levels during middle school. After entering our high school, known for its strong track team, she was under Mr. Williams' guidance. If only I had listened more closely to her stories about coming home late from practice. If I had asked Mr. William about my daughter as a student and as a father back then, such regret would come flooding back.
I don't hold any grudges against you anymore. Mr. William, thus I did resent you when I couldn't pay anymore. I was devastated not knowing where to channel my frustrations. That's why I quit the team and even transferred to another school. But as time passed and I gained some perspective, I realized that you believed in my potential more than anyone else.
Oh, Grace.
Even when I was in a slump, you never gave up on guiding me. And even when I couldn't achieve results in the tournaments, though, you would stay up late, always thinking of always thinking of new training routines. So, of course, your coaching was strict and it was genuinely tough. I even ended up getting injured in the end. But it's because you nurtured me as an athlete that I am who I am today. And thank you so much, Mr. William. I'm truly grateful that you were my mentor.
Grace said, expressing her gratitude with the same smile she had since high school. Seeing her smile, you could feel that she held no resentment towards Mr. William. Because on the contrary, her gratitude towards him was evident.
I should be the one apologizing.
Mr. William, with tears at the corners of his eyes and a pained expression, apologized.
I've always regretted it. I think if I'd noticed your struggles, I wouldn't have pushed you so hard in training. I feel like I did something to you that was unforgivable. When I realized I might have taken away your potential as an athlete, I was scared of facing criticism and ran away. Even today, I was afraid to talk to you directly and was rude to both you and Mr. Brown. I truly feel I failed as a teacher.
But Mr. William, please look up and smile. So, Mary, it's my big day after all.
Grace said with a gentle smile. Hearing her words, Mr. William closed his eyes tightly for a moment, then smiled at Grace, saying thank you. As Grace returned to the venue, I was left alone with Mr. William. As I pondered what to discuss, Mr. William hesitantly began speaking.
I also want to apologize to Mr. Brown.
Huck told me as well.
Yes, actually.
Initially, he had respected me as a teacher and even aspired to be like me one day. However, he became frustrated and envious when he felt he couldn't catch up to me.
Mr. William, perhaps we should have talked more. Well, you saw me as a benchmark. I've always respected you.
But Mr. Brown.
Bert, the fact is, while some of your training methods might have been extreme, you've always done your best for the students. Many have gone on to be successful athletes, and many are grateful to you, including Grace.
As I pondered what to discuss, Mr. William hesitantly began speaking.
Please, Mr. Brown. I truly apologize for everything. I understand I'm in no position to say this, but would you forgive me?
His earnest words struck a chord with me. Being the teacher in that state, my answer was naturally decided.
Takes. Of course, I've always respected you.
As hearing this, a bright smile appeared on Mr. Williams' face, reminiscent of his days as a dedicated teacher. With our misunderstandings cleared, we both walked back to the wedding venue with a light-hearted demeanor. Oh, you with just a high school diploma. You're getting laid off this month. I was taken aback by the words of Mr. Richardson, the newly appointed department head at our branch. He pressed on, seeing my surprise. Didn't you hear? I said folks with just a high school diploma are getting the boot. I finally gathered myself and retorted. Just because you're a manager doesn't mean you're above everyone else in this company. What gives you the right to say that? Facing my logical argument, he coldly responded. I graduated from a prestigious college and am an elite. I've seen many employees in my time. High school grads tend to be slower learners, lack initiative, and although they have a lot to say, they often slack off. These kinds of people drag down the entire team. His biased view made my blood boil. How can you say that the stereotype you have for high school grades applies to me? I've been working diligently, and I don't think I'm inferior to those with a college degree. Colleagues who'd been eavesdropping began to rally around me. Tom, Uppy Bob here might have only a high school diploma, but he's exceptional. There's no one as committed and hardworking as Bob. Please observe Bob's work before making a judgment. Their support warmed my heart, and I felt grateful for the hard work I had put in at the company. However, no matter how much I or my colleagues argued, Mr. Richardson insisted that high school grads were useless and should resign on their own. I have no intention of quitting. Ignoring Mr. Richardson's notice, I continued my job, but then the harassment began. They intentionally left me out of communications, delayed approvals, and rejected my proposals after belittling them. This made my work environment increasingly hostile. A month later, it's been a short time, but thank you for everything. I handed in my resignation to Mr. Richardson. He smirked as he took it. Finally made up your mind, huh? Thanks for your hard work. I nodded and headed to my desk. As I was packing my things, my colleagues surrounded me.
We're gonna miss you, but do well in your new place.
We're rooting for you. Bob. Encouraged, I smiled back.
It's been an honor working with all of you. Looking forward to the day we meet again.
Mr. Richardson looked on with annoyance. I held my box and left the department I had been a part of for 10 years. Originally, I had planned to go to college after high school. However, just before graduation, on a snowy day, my father was a delivery man whose car skidded and crashed into a concrete wall after being hit by another vehicle. Although he survived, he was no longer able to drive. My mother was frail and couldn't work outside, but the little income they got from home-based jobs was merely pocket change. I also had a younger sister who needed financial support. So, I decided to forgo college and find a job. I barely managed to find a job, but thanks to my school counselor who said, "I'll find a job for you." Bob, don't worry, and introduced me to a good company. I was able to secure my employment. I've been sending New Year's cards to that teacher for the past 10 years. The job was in the Chicago branch, far from my family home, but the company offered living facilities with a cafeteria, so I was able to send enough money home. Next 10 years, I worked my tail off for my family to repay the favor to the teacher who helped me find a job and for the company that accepted a high school grad like me. Whenever I faced challenges, I asked questions, practiced until I got it right, learned from my colleagues, researched clients thoroughly, and gradually built my achievements. I was well liked by my older colleagues and admired by my younger colleagues with college degrees. I felt grateful for my fortunate circumstances until Mr. Richardson was appointed. I was told I'm getting fired at the end of the month by the new manager. Richardson, I told Kathy as we sat across from each other at the bar. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. What? Why? Because I only have a high school diploma. He said having someone like me is a burden to the whole team. Listening to my reply, Kathy exclaimed, "That's ridiculous." I might have never seen her this emotional before. I proposed to her after dating for 2 years. We were set to get married in 6 months, and now this hits us. "What are you going to do about it?" Kathy asked. I grinned.
I'm not just gonna let this slide. You know,
That day, I was overwhelmed with joy and a bit of anxiety. Standing next to me was the beautiful Kathy in a pristine white wedding dress. Kathy and I were high school classmates. We both wanted to go to the same college and would often study together in the library. Although I had feelings for her, it wasn't the time to be distracted by romance. I decided that if we both got into the same college, I confessed my feelings. Later on, both of us got into our desired colleges. It felt like a step closer to our dreams. However, an unexpected accident involving my father forced me to start working immediately.
Bob, after all the hard work you put into your studies,
Kathy looked even more upset than me, her shoulders shaking. At graduation, she confessed, "I've always had feelings for you." Bob, that even if we can't go to the same college, I still want to be with you. But I couldn't accept her feelings then. I had to work hard to support my family after only graduating high school. Kathy and I live in different worlds. That was what I thought. 5 years later, I attended a reunion during the summer break. That's when I ran into Kathy again.
"Hey Bob, it's been a while."
She'd always been pretty in high school, but now she had matured even more beautifully.
"You're still working in Chicago, right?"
When I replied yes, her face lit up.
"Actually, I've been working at a design firm in Chicago. I don't know the city well. Could you show me around?"
Despite my initial confusion, I agreed, and we exchanged contact details. From then on, we started hanging out more, visiting tourist spots and trying out local dishes in Chicago. Gradually, my feelings for her reignited. Uttering now, we both had steady jobs, and my younger sister had graduated college and found a job. I felt it was the right time. Kathy, I've always had feelings for you since high school. Would you go out with me? As I confessed with my heart pounding, tears streamed down from Kathy's eyes.
I'm so glad. I never gave up on you. Bob.
Thinking of that time fills me with emotions. Noticing my gaze. Kathy gave a happy smile, making my heart swell even more.
Now please make your entrance.
A staff member at the venue said. The doors opened wide and spotlights shone down. As we walked arm in arm past the seated guests.
Long time no see. I'm Tom.
Sitting in the bride's side was Manager Richardson, who looked as if he'd seen a ghost and let out a scream.
Had you assistants back in the Chicago branch office?
My words were followed by Kathy's.
I've often heard about that time from my husband.
But Mr. Richardson just stood there with his mouth agape and looking lost. As I stand in front of the main table, the Mick begins to introduce the bride and groom.
The bride and groom have already registered their marriage, and Bob decided to change his surname from Collins to Brown.
The wedding invitation included his former name, but another version without his former name was sent to Mr. Richardson. He probably never dreamed I'd show up as the groom at his company's CEO's daughter's wedding. Mick starts detailing my background.
After working at the Chicago branch of Brown Company for 10 years, had transferred to the New York head office and is now actively working as the director of the Human Resources Compliance Department.
Tom's eyes widen in shock. It was the first he'd heard of me working at the headquarters. After the incident with Manager Richardson, I discussed the current department situation with my soon-to-be father-in-law. CEO.
Detached jazz Tom threatened to fire me, and after learning it was legally impossible, began to make my work difficult. Surgeon, if this continues, it'll not only be hard for me, but the atmosphere of the entire department will worsen.
CEO pondered a moment before speaking. It might be time to bring about a change in the entire company, not just concerning Richardson. Currently, we're thinking about setting up an internal affairs to address issues like power and sexual harassments. Bob, how about working in New York? Kathy had mentioned that she wanted to quit her current job and start her own business once they got married. This might be the perfect opportunity. On the day I left the Chicago branch office, I submitted my resignation to Manager Richardson, but I knew it would be declined by the senior management. I had already been informed of my transfer to the compliance department at the New York headquarters, as this hadn't been officially announced. Upsile only the upper management knew. Thanks for all your hard work. You finally made up your mind. Is hearing this from Mr. Richardson almost made me laugh. But I'm marrying the CEO's daughter. It was amusing how he thought he had successfully pushed me out. At knowing this, others at the Chicago branch learned of my transfer to New York later on. After leaving Chicago, colleagues who cared about me reached out. I informed them that I was working in the compliance department at the headquarters and asked them to report any power harassment incidents related to Mr. Richardson. A chief guest and head of the Human Resources Department, Mr. Wilson, delivers a speech. Although I've just recently started working with CEO, he hasn't initiated various measures to improve the company's work environment since establishing the new department.
Although I've just recently started working with the CEO, he has initiated various measures to improve the company's work environment since establishing the new department. He's always dedicated, sincere, passionate. Thanks to CEO's contributions, our company will become a workplace where employees don't have to face any form of harassment.
There was a loud applause from the audience, but only Mr. Richardson was looking down, trembling. Later on, I visited the Chicago branch. I am Bob from the Human Resources Compliance Department in New York. I'd like to discuss some matters. Is that all right? Richard Richardson, perhaps expecting this, nodded in agreement. He hadn't only bullied and discriminated against me due to educational differences, but had also shown educational and gender biases towards other employees, engaging in childish acts of harassment. Putting in the effort to get into a prestigious college is commendable and should be appreciated. However, that doesn't give you the right to look down on others who might not have the same educational background. As a director, it's your responsibility to encourage and uplift your subordinates. I cannot overlook the discrimination and harassment you've been committing. Mr. Richardson was demoted and transferred to the customer service center. We hope he learns to empathize with customers' feelings and utilizes this experience for future relationships in the company. And home, as I peek into the living room, cheerful laughter fills the air. Kathy, gently touching her slightly swollen belly, smiles at me. I'll get dinner ready in a jiffy. As she tries to stand up, my mother stops her. Let Kathy be. She needs to take care of herself. I'll handle it. You shouldn't push yourself either. Mom, watching the playful argument, my wheelchair-bound father chuckles. Hence the usual banter. Yep, I agreed with a chuckle. When I visited Kathy's place to ask for her hand in marriage, I was stunned by the sheer size of her mansion. I had heard that Kathy's father ran a business, but I didn't realize they were that wealthy. Ever since Kathy invited friends over in elementary school, she had been labeled as rich by others. By the time she reached middle school, people often hit her up for money, saying, "You have money so you can spare some." That's why in high school, she decided not to talk about her home or parents. Seeing her welcoming parents made me even more surprised. Like Mr. Brown, the CEO. Ever in my wildest dreams did I imagine my fiancé's father would be the CEO of my company. I had met the CEO once when he visited our branch in Chicago for an inspection. I had met the CEO once when he visited our branch in Chicago for an inspection.
I've heard good things about you, Bob. You're a diligent and outstanding employee. We have high hopes for you.
I remember feeling incredibly honored. Being seen favorably as an employee is one thing, but being the fiancé of his daughter is another. But with my disabled father, and the fact that I only have a high school diploma, would he accept me? Such fears swirled inside me.
I was surprised to learn Kathy's fiancé is one of our employees, but if it's you, I says Bob, I'm relieved. Please take good care of my daughter.
Such meant Mr. and Mrs. Brown welcomed me warmly, and I was so moved I could have cried. Since Kathy is an only child, they expressed their wish for me to be adopted into their family, a common custom. Of course, I'm grateful for that, but I had concerns about my parents. Until now, I have been financially supporting my parents, and my sister practically took care of them. But my sister got married and moved out of state, leaving just my parents living by themselves. Would it be okay if I rushed to my parents' side in case of emergencies? When I asked, the CEO made an astonishing suggestion.
We'd like you to be adopted into our family, but we aren't thinking of living together. But if you too wish, you can live with your parents.
I thought that might be burdensome for Kathy, but she promptly replied, I'd love to live with Bob's parents. Our house is close to my parents, so we can visit often. When I mentioned the idea of living together with my parents, they initially declined, not wanting to interfere with our lives. But Kathy insisted, and now we live together. Now, Kathy is like a beloved daughter to my parents. I can't believe Bob brought home such a lovely wife, and soon we'll have a grandchild. We're truly blessed, my mother said, and my father nodded in agreement. Kathy took my hand and gently placed it on her belly. There have been many hardships in the past, but if they led to our current happiness, then they were all worthwhile. If my life were a movie, I'd want to live in a way that I'd never be ashamed of. As a husband, as a father, as an individual. In these thoughts, I gently caressed Kathy's belly,